Hi, greetings. Thank you so much for taking time to join me on this Chalk Talk on integrating clinical rapid response. So with that, let's just jump into it. Some of you may be wondering, what do we mean by a Chalk Talk? Well, a Chalk Talk is simply, um, I guess, a way to think about strategy and tactics in a very kind of focused manner, right? The idea here behind the Chalk Talk is ultimately to plant seeds for discussion, to get you thinking about things a little bit differently, and to ultimately impact your tactical and strategic decision making. So in this Chalk Talk, what I want to do, and these are typically going to be rather short, I'm going to try and keep it to 20, 25 minutes or less. But today, what I want to talk about is really clinical rapid response. And clinical rapid response is not something typically associated with IT security or medical device security. And so I think is important to really step back and understand that it is a critical aspect and function of a holistic medical device security program. I guess one of the things that I'm starting to learn is when I mention this to a lot of IT teams and cybersecurity teams and medical device teams, they kind of look at me quizzically, and I just assumed everybody knew what a rapid response team was, a clinical rapid response team. And I'm learning that that's not necessarily the case. And then more importantly, I kind of, once I'm able to explain what it is really the next question that kind of comes up is more of, well, why are they part of cybersecurity? What do they have to do with cybersecurity? So my hope in this Chalk Talk is to really talk through all of that. So we're going to talk a little bit about rapid response methodology. We're going to talk about clinical rapid response teams themselves. And then we're going to talk about how do we bring those together. So again, the idea here is to spark discussion and thinking, and more so than give you all the answers. But with that, hopefully you'll find this valuable. And if you have questions, please feel reach out to myself or my team here at CloudWeave, my colleagues. And with that, let's go ahead and get into this. So when we think about incident identification, right? When we're talking not just a security issue, but an actual security incident, right? Something that leads to an actual incident declaration. When it at least comes to medical devices, there are probably three different areas of input, right, that ultimately are going to generate that declaration. And so that input is going to either come through or to the SOC, the Security Operations Center. It's going to come, especially when we're talking about medical devices, to clinical engineering or biomed, if you're calling it biomedical engineering. We're going to use the term clinical engineering. Or it may come to your help desk. And even though you may have very distinct protocols on how people are to raise incidents or report security issues, cybersecurity issues or cybersecurity incidents, ultimately the reality is these are the typical pathways. You may have somebody who's not quite sure. They may be on a desktop doing telemetry that's connected to a bedside monitor, and they're seeing something happen with that desktop, so they're going to call the help desk, right? They're not thinking in a moment. On the other hand, somebody may observe something directly on a medical device and call clinical engineering directly, or the SOC may be monitoring something and see alerts related to medical devices, and then they become the source of that report. So in any one of these cases, though, the three of these different input sources kind of need to all do the same thing. One thing that is a bad practice is where the help desk gets a call and then escalates that call or hands that call off to someone else, like a SOC or a security analyst, or clinical engineering gets the call and they then hand it over to somebody else. And the reason that's bad is because we're wasting time. And so what we really want to get to is where any one of these inputs have the skills to understand what they're doing. So that kind of raises a lot of questions, right? If you put yourself in the shoes of the people that are the inputs here, right, whether they work for the SOC or clinical engineering or a help desk, they need to know what to say, what to ask the person reporting this incident, right? And we need to be able to do that rather quickly. And this is a real important thing. Typically, with any incident, we're trying to determine whether we're going to contain or prevent this incident within 14 minutes or less. There's a lot of reason for that number of 14 minutes or less, and I'm happy to discuss it further if you're interested. But ultimately, we're trying to figure out from the moment that these inputs are coming in, these reports are occurring, to the moment we declare an incident and we get people involved, we're talking about 14 minutes. Now, that 14 minutes is not how long we have from the time that the incident's reported to that we rally the troops. That's from the time that the incident started to the time that the attack is over. So we have about 14 minutes before an attack becomes basically so overwhelming that we're in recovery mode. So one of the things we did several years ago was try to determine how can we quickly figure out, do we have an attack, don't we have an attack, and how do we respond to it? Now, again, here we're talking about medical devices. This is applicable to any kind of cybersecurity incident response, but I'm really trying to focus on medical device security here specifically. So we designed something called Rapid Incident Response Methodology, or Rapid Response Methodology, RRM. Now, what this is part of a much broader program that we call the Cybersecurity Tactical Incident Response Program, or CTIR. Excuse my bad penmanship there. But CTIR, or Cybersecurity Tactical Incident Response, is an entire training program that really goes deep into how do you respond to incidents in healthcare or in other critical infrastructure sectors, but we designed it specifically for healthcare when human life is on the line. If you really think about it, there is no best practices around how do IT organizations or clinical engineering or biomed or your SOC respond to something that involves human life. So CEDAR really is that program that we've designed over 3 or 4 years now, and we've put, I guess, a couple hundred people through that program. Now, one element of that program is this rapid incident response methodology. In that program, we talk about things like protocols and immediate action drills and a whole bunch of other things, the psychology of the defender, the psychology of the attacker, get into a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot to keep in mind if you really want to be good at incident response in a hospital. So I wanted to kind of just tease out this one piece to kind of get you thinking about incident response a little differently. Now, again, if we go back to the previous slide, we're talking about we have these inputs, and we need to assure that each one of these inputs knows what to ask, what is the priority, and then what to do with that information. So when we look at the incident response methodology, the RRM, rapid response methodology, and again, why do we call this rapid? Is because we're up against that 14-minute clock, right? We're trying really hard to kind of get this thing contained or into prevention mode within 14 minutes or less. And if we have human life, that's really vital for us to figure out how we quickly get the right assets and the right people involved very quickly, right? We don't have time to escalate up a chain of command and get other people involved. And this is why you don't want to be in a situation where somebody calls the help desk and they hand the call off to someone else, right? I always say solve for the 3 a.m. problem. What happens if somebody calls the help desk at 3 a.m.? What if you have a smaller organization where you don't have clinical engineering on site 24/7? There's an issue with a medical device, and the nursing supervisor says, you know what, let's try to get a hold of clinical engineering. I can't get a hold of them. Let's just call the help desk and see if they can help. All right, or the SOC sees something and they're saying, well, this is involving a medical device. What do we do? So in the rapid response methodology, we have a series of steps. And I'm not going to go through all of this. You'd have to go through the training program and really understand all this, but I'm going to share with you a couple of small pieces out of this, a subset of the rapid response methodology, to just, again, start getting you thinking about how to maybe restructure or reframe your security program. So the very first thing that we train our team to do is if you have a security incident, right? Somebody is calling about a security incident. So let's pretend this is somebody calling your help desk, or somebody calling clinical engineering, or it's your SOC seeing something on the wire or seeing an alert. Very first thing we need to understand, is this real or not? And how do we know it's real or not, right? And if we believe it's real, if we don't think this is an issue, then we're going to go right away into step 2. And here we're going to get into categorize. And the most important thing we're going to do here is this box right here, right? You may think it's this here, but it's not. Most important thing we want to understand is, what assets are affected? Are these assets, inside of that context of what asset is affected, we want to understand if people are affected, right? And if it's a patient. So if we in just those 4 or 5 seconds, right? If your help desk gets called and this, answer the phone, hi, help desk, and the person on the other line says, I think, I have a security issue, the first thing they should say is, okay, tell me, is the security issue involve anything related to human life? Are there any patients involved in this? Does it impact patient care? Does it impact patient safety? Does it impact patients directly? You want to structure a set of questions from your help desk that really tease out this information very quickly, right? And if the answer to any of that is yes, and we're down, again, we haven't really gotten into the physical asset, right? Like, what are we talking about? Is this a life support device? Is it something diagnostic? Is it a PC or a desktop, a laptop? Like, what is the asset? Very first thing we need to understand is, are humans involved? Is this impacting people? Is it impacting patient safety? So that's really the crux of what I wanted to share with you here, right? Is we need to know if this is real or not, and we need to understand very quickly if we have humans involved, right? And then we need to take the next set of action. So the other steps here, all of the other stuff that you see on the screen, I'm not going to get into today, because ultimately I think that this goes well beyond just the chalk talk. What I'd really like you to take away from this is there are tools and programs out there that we've designed, developed, and created from scratch specifically for healthcare that have been actually broadened beyond healthcare that are focused on incident response to protect human life. And if you're interested in that, then let us know. But for right now, as part of this chalk talk, really I just want you to internalize this goal, maybe, right? That your teams, your help desk, your clinical engineering, and your SOC, and needs to know that if you get a call and there's somebody reporting a security incident, the very first thing they need to figure out is, are humans involved? Is there patient safety? Is a patient attached? Is patient care compromised or potentially could be compromised, right? So let's kind of play out a scenario where we say, there are patients involved, and this is an actual security incident, right? So we've done the triage, right? And we figured out there is an impact to patient care. Who do we dispatch to that, right? Like, who is it that now manages that situation? So if you think about most incident response plans, they're going to escalate up the IT organization, right? Because we're used to responding to incidents that involve data, right? Like, hey, my PC is not acting right, or the server is all of a sudden rebooting every 2 minutes, or hey, we've got some ransomware. Those are all data issues, right? And as soon as we flip that script and we go, wait a minute, the most important thing you can do in IT is protect patient care, right? Your job is to enable and assure that systems never impact patient care. The lack of a system or the use of a system never impacts patient care. So all of a sudden you've got a report, right? One of these 3 inputs that we just talked about has a report that there is an impact to patient care, and the caller or the person is observing a security incident, what is considered to be a real incident until proven otherwise. Who do we call? Well, who we call is the clinical rapid response team. Now, as far as I know, every hospital that takes Medicaid funds and is part of JCO has a clinical rapid response team. And as I mentioned earlier in the kind of the preamble to this talk, a lot of organizations and a lot of people I speak to don't know what a clinical rapid response team is. So my first thing I'd like to do is introduce you to the clinical rapid response team. And what is that? So real briefly, what it is a group of clinicians that have been specially trained. They typically have training in advanced cardiac life support. They have training in advanced medical life support. So above and beyond them being an RN or a physical therapist or a doctor, they've all had to achieve additional certification. So they are specifically trained, and this is part of their standards, to respond to situations where a patient is deteriorating. So typically your clinical rapid response team, and there's probably a code or some way of notifying the clinical rapid response team in your hospital when somebody's potentially having a stroke, having difficulty breathing, their blood pressure drops, they start showing signs of a possible cardiac issue, they may have a code The people responding to that are going to be your clinical rapid response team, and they are going to have the tools and the medications that they need to bring bedside and support that patient, and try to stop that deterioration. Sometimes the clinical rapid response teams will actually do surveillance, right, where they're watching a bunch of patients if you're in a larger hospital system, and they're looking for signs before deterioration happens. But in most cases, this is going to be a set of clinicians that are working out of your emergency department. And if there's a code or a call, they're going to respond in the hospital. They're kind of like the 911 of the hospital, right? Basically the best way to think about them. Now, a couple of things I want you to know about them, aside that from they're a team, that their job is to actually respond to the bedside or anywhere in the hospital and help support and turn around. They take the lead, right? So even if you had, like, if they got called to the ICU, chances are they're going to be in charge, and the ICU team will step back. So when they're called in, they're on the ground. They're going to take over that patient care until they can stabilize that patient. Now, the other important thing to know is they're typically there 24/7, right? So as around the clock, there is a clinical rapid response team that is in the hospital and ready to go. So this helps with a lot of things. One is, when we think about medical device security, right, we need to think about who is going to respond to the patient bedside, who is going to make the decision as to we shut down a medical device or not, who is going to determine if there's an impact to this patient's care. Did the security incident cause patient care impact? Did it cause a deterioration to the patient? Right? All those crazy scenarios we're all scared of ever happening. These are the people, the clinical rapid response team, that are going to be that first line of defense. And again, this is a very different response than you would do for somebody attacking your domain controller or your, a set of desktops or mobile devices or your network infrastructure, right? Very different response. So what we're trying to do here, ultimately, what I think you need to think about is, how do you take that rapid response methodology I showed you earlier and talked about, where you're kind of triaging the situation, determining if it's real or not, determining if there's patients involved, and then integrating that with the clinical rapid response team. And what you want to do is be able to get to a place where you have holistic incident response. So what's holistic incident response looks like? Well, an incident is reported to one of those three inputs, whether it's through the SOC or to the SOC, to your clinical engineering team, or to your help desk, right? And regardless of where that lead comes in, that report comes in, all of those three entities all know how to triage that situation. And each one of those entities, once they've triaged it, can put things in motion, right? You need to have a situation where, hey, if somebody calls the help desk, they're going to be able to go, whoa, this looks like probably something impacting patient care, and we're going to dispatch the clinical rapid response team. And it's seamless, right? We don't want somebody having to call somebody else that's then going to dispatch the team. Time is of the essence. And this is what the rapid response team probably has protocols already in place for, right? They're already getting the call to go to the bedside when there's potentially a stroke or some other situation that is possibly impacting patient life, right? So what do we do? How do we bring this together? What are the things we have to consider? Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? One, you really need to get training on the actual rapid response protocol. So the groups that make up this purple box, which are those three inputs, help desk, right? Clinical engineering, and your SOC. I was going to write CTOC, which is our SOC, but the SOC. Those groups need to be trained on that rapid response protocol. They need to know how to triage a call. They need to know how to take what steps, how to dispatch the clinical rapid response team. There's a bunch of things they need to understand, right? So the second part of that is, you need to get in place clinical rapid response protocols. You need to understand what the protocols are for your clinical rapid response team and get that understood. And then ultimately, you have to have education and awareness, right? You have to train all of your clinical rapid response team members. And in some hospitals, that could be 20, 30, 40 people, because you have 3 shifts, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. There's going to be a variety of people that are part of that clinical rapid response team. So you need to assure they're trained. And that can be daunting. So it's something to be aware of, right? And then you want to test. You want to put this group, this both your initial your initial kind of your dispatch center, if you will, and your clinical rapid response team through a set of tabletops. So that you can test to make sure that this is all working, that everybody understands their role and how this smoothly works. And there's a whole bunch of other things to understand, right? There are certain things that the clinical rapid response team needs to be educated on in terms of security, right? And they need to be made aware of why this is important. So there's a bunch of stuff there, but again, the idea about this chalk talk is to get you thinking and really help you drive to a new level of preparedness. So with that, here are some possible next steps, right? Consider your readiness. Just think about this is a great management exercise, especially with the C-suite, about how do you protect patients from cybersecurity events. Right? We're really good, as I mentioned, on protecting people from a data perspective, but I don't think we really, as an industry, are too good at protecting patients. And that's been a core mission for Sensado, now CloudWave, since our inception in 2013. We've really been trying to crack the code on how do we protect patients and respond in a timely and professional manner. And this, what I'm sharing with you in this chalk talk, is just a little tip of that iceberg on what we've learned. Another thing I would talk to you about is say, review your incident response inputs, right? I gave you those 3 inputs: the SOC, the clinical engineering, and the help desk. Are there others in your organization? Can they, how are they able to triage and prioritize events? Are they asking the right questions? Are they considering the patient safety angle? One way, and this is sad that we have to talk about this, but you have to understand that if a situation with a patient occurred and you get deposed, you're going to, if there's a civil suit, right, you're going to have to discuss all this, right? The question's going to be, well, what do you mean the nurse on 3 West called the help desk, but the help desk took 15 minutes because they had to call their supervisor who was, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they were on call, but they couldn't get a hold of them. And so by the time that they realized that this was actually a medical device issue, and then they rerouted the call to clinical engineering, things fell apart, right? And it caused a massive impact to patient safety. The patient doesn't have to die, they just have to have an impact, right? It's kind of like a never event if you think about it. So think about, what is your ability to triage these things? Spread executive awareness. You really need to get your executives, your CEO, your CMO, CNO, a bunch of other people to understand why this is important in the day and age that we live in, right? So the last thing is, I've mentioned this throughout our Chalk Talk, we can help. We've got all kinds of training programs, tabletops. We do some pretty advanced simulations with involving patients and actually putting people through security events where we have actual patient simulators we use from your simulation labs and kind of play through those scenarios and take away the medical devices and see how people deteriorate or rise to the occasion. And there's a lot more we do. I mean, we go well beyond just doing this, but so if we can do something to help you, please reach out to us. And no, not everything has to involve a contract. If you just have ideas you want to run through or you want to clarify a point, feel free to reach out. Speaking of that, we do have a really amazing program. Most of you that are listening to this presentation are probably already part of our Cybersecurity Insider program. If you're not part of the Cybersecurity Insider program, it has a wealth of benefits. We do monthly talks. We put chalk talks out like this. We've got special events. We're doing a free tabletop for everybody that's part of the Cybersecurity Insider program. And here's the best part of it. It's absolutely free. You can have as many people from your organization join. The training we put you through, the monthly stuff, the chalk talks, all of this counts as security awareness training for your IT security staff. So you're getting a benefit there where if you don't have the economics to send people out for training, get them to start joining this program. And they'll definitely benefit. We also look at this as an opportunity for us to learn. So if there's topics or things that you want to hear about, please let us know. And if you'd like to present, we'd love to have you. We'd love to open this up to others who are interested in presenting. You can reach out to cwsocial@gocloudwave.com and they can get you set up in the Insider program. But with that, we're just about at 25 minutes. I was hoping to get this done under 20. But if you know me at all, this is actually really good for me because I love to talk about this stuff. I'm extremely passionate about it. And with that, I am going to sign off. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this makes a tremendous difference in the lives of your patients. Thank you.